No is such a small word, but it can be so hard to say. And I think for a lot of people, it is not because they do not know the word. It is because somewhere along the way they learned that saying no was going to cost them something. Maybe it would cost them love. Maybe it would cost them approval. Maybe it would start an argument. Maybe someone would get cold, disappointed, or make them feel guilty. So they learned to say yes. Yes, I can help. Yes, I can come. Yes, I can do that. Yes, I am okay with it. Yes, it is fine. But inside, it is not fine. Inside, they feel tired. They feel resentful. They feel uncomfortable. They feel like they are disappearing a little bit every time they agree to something they do not really want to do. And that is why learning to say no is so important. Not because we should become selfish, not because we should stop caring about people, not because every request from another person is some kind of attack, but because if you never say no, your yes stops being honest. You are not really choosing anymore. You are just reacting out of fear, guilt, pressure, or habit. And after a while, that can really hurt the way you feel about yourself. Because deep down, you know when you are betraying yourself. You know when you are saying yes just to avoid someone's reaction. You know when something does not feel right to you. You know when a request crosses a line. You know when something goes against your values. And if you keep ignoring that inner voice, eventually it gets harder to trust yourself. That is one reason no is connected to self-esteem. Self-esteem is not just looking in the mirror and saying nice things to yourself. It is also how you treat yourself in real life. Do you protect your time? Do you listen to your body? Do you honor your values? Do you allow yourself to have limits? Do you act like your peace is worth protecting? Because if you are always teaching yourself that everyone else comes first and you come last, that creates pain. It creates resentment. And it can make you feel like your life belongs to everybody but you. For some people, saying no is hard because of how they were raised. If you grew up with parents who did not respect your feelings, saying no might feel scary. If you were punished for disagreeing, you might still feel nervous when someone asks you for something. If you were called selfish every time you had a need, you might now feel guilty for having any needs at all. If your home was full of anger, guilt, criticism, addiction, or emotional unpredictability, you may have learned to keep the peace by being easy. Easy to deal with, easy to ask, easy to pressure, easy to control. You may have learned to read people's moods before you even knew how to read yourself. So now, as an adult, when someone asks you for something, your first instinct may not be, do I want to do this? Your first instinct may be, how do I keep them from getting upset? That is a hard way to live. And I want to say this gently. If that is you, you are not weak. You are not broken. You probably learned that pattern because at some point it helped you survive emotionally. But survival patterns can become prisons later. At some point, you have to ask yourself, am I still keeping the peace or am I abandoning myself? Because there is a difference. Saying no does not always have to be harsh. Sometimes it can be very simple. I cannot do that. I am not available. I am not comfortable with that. I do not want to be involved in that. I need to think about it. That does not feel right to me. I care about you, but I cannot help with this. And sometimes no needs a little kindness around it. Not because you owe everyone a long explanation, but because you can be honest and still be considerate. You can say, I really appreciate you asking, but I cannot come. I love you, but I do not have the energy for that conversation tonight. I understand why you are asking, but I am not able to take that on. I hope you understand, but this is not something I can do. That goes against what I believe, so I cannot be part of it. That kind of no is not cruel. It is clear. And clarity can actually protect relationships. A lot of people think saying no will ruin the relationship, but sometimes saying yes when you do not mean it is what slowly ruins the relationship. Because resentment builds, you start pulling away. You start feeling annoyed. You start feeling used. You start feeling like the other person should somehow know you are overwhelmed, even though you never told them the truth. A gentle no early on can prevent anger later. It gives the other person a chance to know the real you, not just the version of you who agrees to everything. And healthy people can handle that. They may be disappointed. That is normal. Nobody loves being told no. But there is a difference between disappointment and punishment. A healthy person may feel disappointed, but they will still respect you. An unhealthy person may guilt you, pressure you, insult you, or keep pushing after you already gave an answer. And that tells you something. Sometimes your no shows you who actually respects you, because people who only like you when you are useful are not really loving you fully. They are loving what they can get from you. That can be painful to see, but it is also freeing, because once you start saying no, the relationships in your life become more honest. Some people will adjust, some people will respect you more, some people will be relieved that you are finally being honest, and some people may leave. That hurts, but sometimes it also shows you that the relationship was built on you having no boundaries. Now, I also want to be fair, because saying no is not always automatically the right thing. There are times when saying no can be selfish. There are times when someone really does need you. There are times when your child, your partner, your friend, your family member, or someone you love is asking for help because they are truly struggling. And if you always say no just because you do not feel like being bothered, that is not a boundary. That is neglect. Love does require effort sometimes. Friendship requires effort. Family requires effort. Work requires effort. Being a decent person requires effort. So this is not about using the word no as an excuse to stop showing up for people. It is about learning the difference between helping and being drained, the difference between responsibility and being taken advantage of, the difference between love and guilt, the difference between generosity and self-abandonment. At work, this can get complicated too. Sometimes you cannot just say no to something that is part of your actual job. If it is your role, and it is fair, and it is safe, and it is legal, then you may have to do it, even if you do not feel like it. That is part of responsibility. But there are also times when work takes advantage of people who are dependable. Maybe you are always the one asked to stay late. Maybe you are always fixing other people's mistakes. Maybe you are expected to answer messages after hours. Maybe your kindness and work ethic are being used against you. In that case, saying no may need to be professional. It might sound like, I can help with that tomorrow during my scheduled hours. I am at capacity right now. Which task would you like me to prioritize? I cannot take on another project unless something else is moved. I want to support the team, but this workload is not sustainable. I am not available outside of work hours today. That is not being difficult. That is being clear about what one person can reasonably carry. And honestly, a lot of people need to learn that no does not always have to be dramatic. You do not always need a speech. You do not need to explain your whole history. You do not need to prove that you are tired enough, busy enough, sick enough, or overwhelmed enough to deserve a boundary. Sometimes you can just say, no, I cannot, and then stop talking. That pause can feel uncomfortable if you are used to over-explaining. But over-explaining often comes from fear. It comes from trying to convince the other person not to be upset with you. It comes from hoping that if you give a perfect enough explanation, they will give you permission to have a limit. But you do not need permission to have a limit. You can be kind, you can be respectful, you can care about the other person, and you can still say no. One thing that helps is learning to pause before answering. If you are someone who automatically says yes, practice saying, let me think about it. I need to check my schedule. I will get back to you. I am not sure yet. That gives you time to ask yourself what you actually want. Not what will keep everyone calm, not what will make people like you, not what will avoid conflict, but what is actually honest. And if you feel guilty after saying no, try not to panic. Guilt does not always mean you did something wrong. Sometimes guilt just means you are doing something new. Sometimes it means you're breaking an old pattern. Sometimes it means the younger version of you is still afraid someone will stop loving you if you disappoint them. So be gentle with yourself. You can say no and still be loving. You can say no and still be generous. You can say no and still be a good friend. You can say no and still be a good partner. You can say no and still be a good employee. You can say no and still be a good person. Because your goodness should not depend on how much of yourself you are willing to give away. The goal is not to become cold. The goal is to become honest, to stop saying yes when your heart is saying no, to stop agreeing to things that leave you bitter, to stop participating in things that go against your values, to stop shrinking just so other people do not have to feel uncomfortable. A real no can feel scary at first. Your voice might shake. You might overthink it afterward. You might worry that you were rude. You might feel the urge to text back and soften it, explain it, fix it, take it back. But every time you practice a healthy no, you teach yourself something. You teach yourself that you can survive disappointment. You teach yourself that you can handle discomfort. You teach yourself that your life does not have to be controlled by guilt. And little by little, you start trusting yourself again. That is the real power of no. It brings you back to yourself. It reminds you that you are allowed to have a voice. You are allowed to have limits. You are allowed to have values. You are allowed to decide what you give your time, energy, body, attention, and heart to. So the next time someone asks something of you and everything inside you tightens, pause. Do not rush to make them comfortable. Ask yourself, do I really want to do this? Is this my responsibility? Am I able to help without hurting myself? Does this align with who I am trying to be? And if the honest answer is no, then let yourself say no. Say it kindly if you can. Say it firmly if you have to. But do not keep abandoning yourself just to avoid someone else's reaction. No is not always negative. Sometimes no is the word that protects your peace. Sometimes no protects your friendships from resentment. Sometimes no protects your mental health. Sometimes no protects your self-respect. Sometimes no protects the person you are becoming. And sometimes the most loving thing you can say to yourself and to others is simply, no, I cannot do that. If this helped you, please like this video so it can reach more people who need to hear it. And subscribe for more honest conversations about mental health, healing, relationships, and self-respect.